taken on many of these terrorist nations, rogue nations, in terms of their behavior. Was Kofi Annan as good at that? Probably not. I think we can all agree with that. But this current one, Bonn, has been much better, and the Security Council has been, for the most part, much better than it's been in the past.
So I need a couple minutes because this is an important question which points out what my opening statement was all about, the difference in resolve between the parties. Starting with George McGovern's long discredited naivete regarding Israel and the Middle East and foreign policy, and continuing with the Church Commission of the 1970s, the Democratic Congress, which defunded and devalued human intelligence gathering, which helped lead up to 9/11. You saw in the 1980s Democrats opposing every step of the way Ronald Reagan's confrontation of evil. In fact, they didn't allow him to use the term evil empire, yet he rescued Natan Sharansky and 1 million Soviet Jews came to Israel. In the 90s, we saw further Democrat weakness in President Clinton's failure to respond to World Trade Center 1, the attack in '93, the attack on the Khobar Towers, the attack on the embassies in East Africa and Kenya and Tanzania, the attack on the Cole in 2000. All of this happened, weakness in Democrat foreign policy. Now we get to the United Nations. I have a special place in my... I think everybody here is aware of the fact that Libya and Sudan and Iran, in fact, Iran is the chairman of the Proliferation Committee. How's that? Yeah. Jewish Democrats, and there are 40 Jewish Democrats in Congress. There are only 3 Jewish Republicans in Congress. 2 senators, Norm Coleman and Arlen Specter, and Congressman Eric Cantor, who's number 3 or 4 in the House. Jewish Democrats shamefully and uniformly opposed the magnificent John Bolton as our ambassador to the United Nations. Even after, years ago, he had personally led the effort to repeal the Zionism is racism canard. It is terribly important that you understand. Democrats did not support this hero, he's not Jewish, this great man, John Bolton. Republicans like Senator Coleman battle for UN reform and an end to the routine bashing of Israel. Some 40 or 50% of all the resolutions that come out of the new Human Rights Council was supposed to be an improvement after the Durban Hate Israel Fest, are bashing of Israel, selected out. Many Democrats repeatedly apologize for a body which has broken its promises to prevent war, alleviate human suffering, or rescue victims of genocide over 60 years from Rwanda to Darfur. The difference between the parties vis-a-vis the United Nations is huge.
And who says Republicans don't oversimplify? Look, frankly, this administration, if this administration was so concerned about the United Nations and trying to make sure that it was its position on Israel was changed, they wouldn't have filed complaints with the filed complaints about the way that the Israelis treat the Palestinians. Only 2 presidents have done this: George W. Bush and Richard Nixon, both Republicans. A lot of the statements that you've just heard with regards to lost opportunities I would say, are equally disingenuous with regards to Al-Qaeda and with what's happened with regards to Sudan, etc. Bill Clinton has been very clear about what actually happened with those discussions, and that it was actually Sudan that dropped the ball on this, that we said we would be open to it, and then things sort of fell apart with regards to other issues. There's other repeated examples, but John Bolton was put down, was opposed by Democrats. It had little to do with what he's done with regards to, has less to do with what happened with Israel than his approach to everybody who doesn't agree with him, which is to berate and yell at them. And this is not how you do international diplomacy. This is not how Bill Richardson did diplomacy. This is, it's unheard of. Even when, when Adlai Stevenson was up there humiliating the Russians in the Security Council back in the 1960s, there was still discussions going back and forth, and it wasn't this juvenile approach of, I'm not going to talk with you and you're bad if I don't deal with you. A lot more changes made in terms of reforming the United Nations happened because Clinton had built up good relationships with the United Nations so that they could ask for these changes to be made.
Just 10 seconds on that. I don't know how you both give credit to Ambassador Bolton for the progress on the North Korean issue, but then say that he can't get along with anybody and he can't solve any problems.
Sure. The answer is this, is that for the first years that Bolton was in office, he refused to even go through multilateral discussions and just said, we're not going to deal with you. It wasn't until in the last, basically I'd say around 2006, 2005, when finally this administration went back to what the previous administration did with true multilateral talks with the United States actually being present at those talks. That's the difference. Maybe Bolton learned his lesson and figured out after Iraq we can't solve all the world's problems by ourselves.
Just 5 seconds. Actually, you're quite wrong, of course. It was Senator Kerry. It was Senator Kerry in the 2004 race who blamed the president for not having direct negotiations with the North Koreans. It was President Bush and finally Ambassador Bolton who pulled together the six-party talks to make progress on North Korea.
This is really the last word on this.
That is not accurate. For the first couple of years, they said they would not deal with, they wouldn't take part in it. They just had to do what the United States said.
All right, to Larry. Wouldn't you admit that there is an important strain in the Republican Party that is not friendly to Israel? Do you think Condoleezza Rice, James Baker, Brent Scowcroft, George Bush Sr., Ron Paul, and Pat Buchanan are supporters of Israel? Aren't they important figures in the Republican Party? And if so, what does that say about the Republican Party being friendly to Jews?
So we could take them one by one. We'll be here all day. But as far as friendly to Jews, President Bush Sr. helped lead the rescue of Ethiopian Jewry. I think he'll be remembered very warmly by international Jewry for that action, and it was a magnificent effort. James Baker's not on my favorite list, and I don't get his Christmas cards. Condoleezza Rice is now captured by the State Department. And that is, by the way, Bill Clinton, of course, went on a victory lap, a tour of the Arab states after his presidency, picked up quite a few checks from the Arab Gulf states. It is difficult. The State Department, there are 52 or 54 Muslim nations. There are 22 Arab states. They all have embassies and consulates, and they all have offices in Washington at the State Department at Foggy Bottom. So there's a huge pressure built up. They all want to get along in their countries. They all come back, and they all lobby the Secretary of State, hey, this is what we're hearing from Morocco and from Jordan and from Iraq, et cetera. It is very difficult to remain resolute at the State Department, which is why I'm very happy we have this president who doesn't believe, like Senator Kerry did, and I guess many other Democrats do, that there should be a global test for American foreign policy. I heard already about how we should get along with the world. Actually, the resolve of the United States, the strength of the United States, the confrontation of jihad is working. Guess why? France and Germany had their presidents and prime ministers both visit last week. They're both more conservative governments elected, and not coincidentally, I won't run on too long. Not coincidentally, both are more conservative governments and better friends of the United States and Israel. And I would cite not just France and Germany, but practically all of Eastern Europe and Japan and India have never been more strategically close to the United States, and Australia's John Howard conservative, and the election in Canada, Stephen Harper, pro-Israel conservative, pro-America, and Mexico, actually, and other countries in Latin and South America. Countries that become more conservative and want to work with a president and an administration that they trust will keep its word and be resolved in foreign policy, tend to actually get along better with the United States and therefore with Israel.
I would just point out with regards to France, Chirac was from the same party as Sarkozy. The difference is just Chirac felt that he was a was that right? I had to get Chirac, right? Chirac was an Arab, was always an Arabist, and at least he's been replaced by someone who's been a lot better. But that had less to do, someone who's at least much more friendly to the United States as well. But the problem has been with many of these countries is if we only support conservatives and don't encourage policies in these countries that give hope in the rise of middle class, then you create the Hugo Chavez's of the world. You create the Fidel Castros. And that's a little bit of what's happening now, even to an extent in Mexico, where we have an entire state almost entirely underwater. And that administration has been very slow to respond because it tends to be one of the more, it's basically become almost like the Katrina for Mexico.